Hey guys, it's Austin here with OutJeeping. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to replace control arms on your solid axle vehicle. Now today, I'm going to be replacing both the lower control arms on the front axle of this 98 Jeep Cherokee right behind me. And I got a bad case of the death wobble, so I'm hoping that with these new control arms, it'll fix it because the bushings are looking a little dry rotted. So today I got some brand new ones to throw in there, but I'll show you how you can replace the upper ones too while we're down there. So let's get started. So the best way to access and remove the old control arms is basically to lift up the front end of the vehicle and let the axle drip down. And to do that, we're going to need to jack it up and pull off both of the tires. If you're just doing one control arm, you only have to do one, but since I'm going to be doing both sides, I'm going to go and remove both the front wheels. So before we let this down on the jack stands, I'm going to go and pop off the wheels. If you don't have an impact driver, I recommend breaking these free when the vehicle is still on the ground. That way it should come off a lot easier. Alright, now I'm going to lower this down so that the weight of the vehicle is on the jack stands that are supported on the frame, and that way we don't have any weight on the front axle. And I'm just going to leave the jack right there. Alright, so looking in the wheel well of the vehicle, we can see that our lower control arm is right here. It attaches from our frame all the way down to the bottom side of the axle. And it's going to be on both sides, and then we also have our upper control arms, which are going to be back here. Might be kind of hard to see, but there's an access hole right here in the frame to get that bolt out, and then it's going to go and attach to the top of the axle right here. And since this is the Cherokee, it's going to attach to the top of the pumpkin on the driver's side over here, and it's just going to have another upper control arm mount on the other side. So today we're going to be removing these lower ones, and basically what I want to do is actually use some ratchet straps to make sure that the axle doesn't shift back when we remove the old control arms. So that way when we install our new ones, it should go in nicely and we won't have to be fighting to push it over. So some reasons why you need to replace or upgrade your control arms on your vehicle is one, you can have a lifted suspension, and by having longer arms you could correct the angle of caster in your front axle. Or your bushings could just be bad, and it's easier sometimes just to replace the entire arm. They're pretty cheap as they were, and the ones I'm replacing today are only like 17 bucks a piece, so I'll put a link in the description below. And some ways you can tell that your bushings are bad by not removing it is just taking a close look at it and make sure that the bolt is in the center of where the bushing is, and if it's like either to one side or the other, that's a good indication to tell that your bushings are bad, or if you have like some major dry rot, or if you can even see it move when you're like accelerating from outside the vehicle. So we're going to get ready to remove this. I'm going to get the ratchet straps ready, but what you're going to need for some tools is basically a 21mm socket and a 21mm wrench if you can get it on the back side. If you have an impact, this is going to help a lot to get those out. Otherwise they're pretty stubborn and you might need to get a big breaker bar. Alright, so I just got my ratchet strap in place and I have a little bit of a tension on it right now, and basically I went around the entire axle tube and then I attached it up front to the core support that goes between the two frame rails in a nice solid spot. And basically I put a little bit of tension because once we remove the old control arm, the axle is going to want to shift back. So if your vehicle doesn't have a good attachment point, you might have a front bumper where you can attach it to. Basically I want something to pull it forward because it's going to be going back. So now I'm going to remove our lower control arm over here, and basically I'm going to use a 21 on an impact, and since I don't have a wrench, I'm actually going to be using a breaker with a 21 on the back side. There we go. All right, so with the frame side removed, all we got to do is remove it from our axle. And on the driver's side of this Jeep Cherokee, it's a little bit hard because I can't really get in here with my impact gun. If you had one of those swivel heads, it'll be a little bit easier. And if the pumpkin wasn't so close to our bolt, it would be easier to get from the back side, which you can do on the other side, so it'll be a lot easier. But yeah, just the clearances are going to be a little bit tight here. I also forgot to mention, if you have a Jeep Grand Cherokee or maybe a Wrangler, they actually use cam bolts on these front lowers over here. So you're going to want to make sure to mark the position that the cam bolts are in. That way you can get your alignment correct when you put the new control arms in, and that way your caster will be set properly. Now they're all fixed. Now for this Jeep Cherokee, you don't have to worry about any cam bolts. It actually has an adjustment up by the frame that's already set in place from the factory, and you're not going to be able to remove that because usually it's all rusted in, so it'll keep the position, so you won't have to worry about it being misaligned after you replace it. So I'm going to try and get this off with the breaker bar. Alright, so I actually did have to jack up the vehicle just a little bit to be able to get some wrenches under there. So I'm going to go and drop this down a little bit. That way there's no weight on the axle. And then we can line up the new control arm and see if we have to move the axle forward with a ratchet strap or not. Now when we install it, I don't think it really matters, but I'm actually going to have it so that the lip of this bushing is actually facing towards the inside of the vehicle, because that's how it was when I took it off. But they're basically the same length and there's no bend to them. But if yours does have a bend, you're going to want to make sure you have it put back on the way you took it off. That way it might have to clear any tires, and you don't want any problems with that. So if you have straight control arms, it's usually not a big deal, but I'm going to make sure that the bushings are facing the inside. Alright, so we're actually looking pretty good, but we're not quite there, maybe a 1/16 of an inch off, so I'm actually going to release the ratchet strap a little bit because it's actually too much forward. Alright, so that was a little bit difficult to feed through. That's because the alignment for the caster on this vehicle actually has a little fork behind there. And it's a separate little thing that goes back and forth, and there's an adjuster behind here. So basically the main holes are slotted and it'll move back and forth, but that little adjuster was just up a little bit, and I had to basically hammer it through to make sure that those align so that the way the hole is nice and straight. Well, basically I got that all on there, and I'm just going to put the nut on the back side, and I'm not going to tighten this down yet until I get the full weight of the vehicle on the front axle. That way I won't have any premature wear on our front bushings. Alright, so if you did need to replace your upper control arms on this vehicle, they actually have flag bolts, and they use them both on the axle and the frame side. So actually inside of here is actually an access hole, and they have a flag nut that's stuck inside. That way all you have to do is loosen up the nut on the other side, which is up around on the other side of the frame rail, and that way it should be able to hold that bolt in place without it spinning on the other side. And it's going to be similar over here on the axle side up on top. All you got to do is pull off that nut, and then you should be able to pull out the entire flag bolt. Now when it comes to installing new upper control arms, if your axle did shift, a good way to get it into the correct spot is basically by jacking up in different locations. So if it needs to come forward more, you can use a jack and actually put it up on the pinion side of the front axle. This will help tilt it and push it forward a little bit more. And if it's the opposite, you can either lift right on the knuckle. That way it'll shift it back, and you'll have room to play there to get those bolts fed into place. Now on this style front axle, the axle side upper control arm bushings are actually pressed into the axle housing, and to remove those and replace them, you can actually take a look at my one video on how to install a 3-link suspension. I show how you can take those out. But basically there's a variety of ways. You can maybe have a makeshift puller to pull it out, or you can just use an air chisel, or just chisel it by hand, basically just to get that all out of there. And then to press in the new ones, you can either hammer it in with a socket or again use a press of your choice. There's a lot of different techniques on that. There's more than one way to skin a cat, but that's pretty much how you replace the upper control arms. So now I'm going to go and replace the other lower control arm on the other side of the vehicle, and then we should be able to put the weight of the vehicle back on the front axle and torque all 4 of the lower control arm bolts down to 85 pound-feet of torque. So once again on this side, since there is no pumpkin for the differential, we can put our impact gun on the back side. Alright, so that hole doesn't line up quite right, so I'm going to take the ratchet strap and push it forward more. Alright, looks like we're right on. And once again, I'm going to have to hammer this in. And then put the nut on the back side. So now with the ratchet strap out of the way, I'm actually going to jack up the front of the vehicle so all the weight is on the front axle. Alright, so when the vehicle is just off the jack stands from the frame, I'm going to go and tighten these up right now and torque them down to 85 foot-pounds. Alright, so that's going to do it for our lower control arms. Now if you replace your upper ones, you're also going to want to torque it down when the vehicle is on its own weight on the front axle, and those are going to be torqued down to 55 foot-pounds. So with everything done, we can go and throw back on the wheels. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today's video. As you can see, it wasn't too difficult to do, and having a ratchet strap definitely helps, because the last time I took a control arm off without it, it was a pain in the butt trying to get it back in, because even like with kicking it and doing all that other stuff, it's still really hard to move the axle and line up the bolt. So I would recommend getting ratchet straps if you plan on doing this. And same thing with the upper control arms. If you need to move that axle, you can just use the jack and put it in different spots to either tilt it one way or the other. That way you should be able to get your bolts lined up. But I'm going to put the link in the description below on where you can find the control arms I used in this video. And if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe to the Outchipping YouTube channel to help keep these videos coming. And if you have any comments or questions, post them below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.